Exclusive. Anti-corruption war will only impress me when Seyi Tinubu is arrested. David Hundeyin. In this exclusive interview with Dorke's World, investigative journalist David Hundeyin speaks about matters relating to the state of the nation, particularly President Bola Tinubu's 1 year in office, his expectations and forecasts for the administration's performance. He also spoke on the chances of success of an opposition political movement and the need to tackle the matter of violence that impedes the viability of such movements. In this interview, Hundeyin addresses the economic and anti-corruption mission of the government and the need for media literacy in Nigeria. He also touches on some issues of the day, including the controversial coastal highway from Lagos to Calabar. Speaking with Dorke's World journalist Amadine Obewe, David had this to say. Last month made it exactly 1 year since Bola Tinubu became the president of Nigeria and was sworn in. 1 year later, what is your assessment? Did you expect everything that is currently happening? They asked. I didn't expect it. I used data to project a lot of these things that have happened. I said, for example, multiple times that the sole purpose of Tinubu's presidency would be for the benefit of Tinubu the man, Tinubu the family, and the wider political and economic organization he has built around him over the years. That would be the sole animating purpose of a Tinubu presidency, unlike any other president in history, where an attempt was made to at least pretend that there was some sort of governance going on in some kind of national interest. But that was not always the case, but at least the pretense was made. In this case, there will be no pretense. I said that multiple times, and I think that the past 1 year has borne me out of this. Before he even settled down in office, it did not take up to a month. His very first policy decision had nothing to do with that unholy arrangement that is going on now between Owando, which as you know is owned by his nephew. Essentially, Owando has become a sort of de facto NNPC in a deal that restructures in a way that no one is really quite sure how that came about, but that is just what it is now. So essentially, the Tinubu family is now at the vanguard of the Nigerian energy industry, and NNPC has been cornered by one family effectively, which is without precedent in Nigerian history. Something else I said was that his Lagos blueprint of overtaxation without offering any value in return will be scaled up to the federal level. Entities that specialize in revenue collection would record massive share price increase, because previously things that used to be done directly, you would go to a bank, pay into a certain government account, receive a teller, and that would be that. Nowadays, everything has to go through some third party, which has some sort of link to Tinubu. If the people are expecting governance in the midst of all this, good luck to them, because they are not going to get it. That is exactly what has happened. Has the security situation improved? It has significantly worsened. Buhari's years are now looking like the good old days. The short to medium term outlook, how does it look? The stampede of investors running for the exits to get out of Nigeria tells a story on its own. Most recently, we saw this story about how Maersk supposedly was going to invest $600 million into Nigeria, and he went to town with it and did the whole song and dance about global shipping, giants investing dollars into Nigeria, which was supposedly meant to reflect on the well economic policy of his government so far. Only for Maersk themselves to essentially come out and say, we don't know what you are talking about, this never happened, this is fake news. And it is not the first time things like this have happened. Even in diplomatic space, they have multiple incidents like this. On the UAE lifting visa ban, everyone was happy, only for the UAE to come out and say no, no such thing happened and no such engagement has taken place, and we have issued no such directive. As we speak, the visa ban is still in effect almost a year since they went to social media and made joyful noise out of the announcement. This is what a Tinubu presidency was always going to be. So there is absolutely nothing surprising. I am not disappointed because it is exactly what I expected. So I'd like to get your thoughts as to activities on the economic front and the anti-corruption front. Do they move at do they move you at all? No, they do not. Because again, you cannot get propriety from the impropriety. So if the person at the top is the biggest criminal of them all, and then we are scrambling around looking for one better edu, then I'm sorry, that does not impress me. So if the person who is at the very top is someone whose entire career and fortune is criminality and political corruption, and this is proven. These are not just allegations and accusations, these are proven things. And I'm not even talking about proven in the sense of some of the work that I did. I'm also talking about some of the work that is out there in mainstream media. So, for example, the fact that this person's son was able to purchase an $11 million mansion in London. A 37-year-old unemployed kid was able to purchase the $11 million mansion in West London using the proceeds of a state's oil corruption enterprise. This was reported in Bloomberg literally like the week before his inauguration, and that very individual, that son, till today is prancing around Aso Rock, charging people for having access to his dad and all sorts of things. That is what is happening at Aso Rock. And you are saying I should be impressed because you're suspending one better Edu who diverted 500 million naira. Yes, 500 million naira sounds like a lot of money, but compared to what is actually going on at Aso Villa, it is chicken change. Same thing with the Yahya Bello thing with $850,000. Yes, it is a lot of money, but more than a billion naira or about 40 billion or 100 billion. How about 250 billion? Because that is where the real corruption is. It is at the very top level. So one thing that I think perfected during the Buhari era was how to confuse Nigerians with numbers, because these guys understand that a large number of Nigerians are numerically illiterate. Too many Nigerians, if you tell them 575 million naira and then you tell them 2.5 billion naira, which figure sounds like more to them? Instinctively, they choose the first figure because it sounds like a lot of money. This was a trick that was played on Nigerians during the whole thing about Diezani Alison Madueke. We were having all these fantastic sums of money being quoted. She was accused of stealing $90 billion, which is numerically impossible because Nigeria's entire federal budget was roughly about 30 billion for a year. So if one person stole $90 billion, then that means for 3 years nothing happened in Nigeria. For 3 years, even the presidents of Nigeria did not eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The only thing that happened was that one person just diverted the entire federal and state budgets for 3 whole years, which is absolute nonsense. It is not true. But again, Nigerians are numerically illiterate, so these things are used as distractions. Then dangle these things in front of you so that you don't look at what you are really supposed to be looking at. So if you are going on and on about Yahya Bello's $850,000 or better Edu's 500 million naira case, then you are not looking at Bola Tinubu and Seyi Tinubu, because that is where the real story is. You are not looking at Femi Bajabiamila and the people in the Aso Villa. You are not looking at the chief of staff or the Senate President Godzilla Pabio, because that is where the real story is. Instead, they are looking at distractions. They sacrifice pawns who are disposable. With all due respect to her, politically, Betta Edu is an orphan. She is very easy to discard. She has very little political value. She could be disposed of that way. Yahya Bello is now an ex-governor. He is not part of the administration. He has no post, and in the Nigerian political cycle, once you are out of circulation for 4 years, you might as well be out of circulation for 40 years. So it is now known that even though just a few months ago, he was a very powerful person. Now, for the fact he's no longer in political power, he can be treated this way. People think that something insignificant has been done meanwhile. All they're doing, all they're actually doing is basically just sending the EFCC to investigate private citizens who used to be involved in corruption, which is good, but that is not an impressive thing at all. When I'll be impressed is the day I'll hear that Seyi Tinubu is getting arrested for racketeering. That is the real story. So, in terms of solutions, I suspect that if you have this forecast about the current government, naturally anyone would start to wonder what are the options. To delve a little bit into the political aspect, what is your take on the opposition as we speak? Is there any hope that a credible opposition can perhaps rise to make a difference or change the situation of things? Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that it's already been demonstrated, I think, from the last election, that it is entirely possible for political movements to come into existence and to exert power. But also no, as the last election also proved, even after going to unimaginable extents. In the Nigerian political context, it still happens that the Nigerian states or those in control of the Nigerian state have a capacity for something that the generality of people do not. And that is something that is violence. So I'm very, very careful to answer the question without saying something that I don't want to be quoted saying. Whatever political movement or opposition that is going to successfully challenge the existing order needs to figure out how to solve that particular problem, because it is all well and good winning an election. For the record, I 100% believe that Peter Obi won that election. There is evidence showing that, however, what the APC administration, the existing establishment has, that Peter Obi did not have, or that Peter Obi's movement did not have, is the ability to exert widespread coordinated violence in pursuit of certain goals, right? So in the unique Nigerian political context, it's not just about votes. It is also about commanding the influence of the people who have the capacity to influence violence. So that means the police, that could mean the armed forces, it could mean the so-called thugs that we always see in every election, who somehow magically get armed and funded around election time. Nobody ever knows who did it. They always seem to act in favor of the ruling party, but nobody ever knows who sponsors them or where they got their arms, where they got their funding from. It is very interesting sort of mystery that exists in plain sight. So whatever political opposition is going to upset the existing order needs to figure out how to solve those problems. I'm not going to make any recommendations because, as said, I do not want to be seen advocating for something that I'm not advocating for. But the fact remains that it is an intractable problem that needs to be solved, because even if you get 25 million votes in a Nigerian election, at the end of the day, if the person who is counting the votes or who is announcing the results is on the side of somebody who scored 1.5 million votes and they decide to write your 25 million as 2.5 million, you cannot do anything about it, because they will simply tell you go to court, where you are going to meet a judge who is also on the payroll of whoever. So these are the problems. I think even more pressing than electoral politics. Those are the questions that need to be answered. The very structure and nature of the system has to be upended, or the system needs to be cleansed in some way, because there are too many deeply embedded operators within that system who are making it such that the system itself guarantees political retrogression. So this time, it is not just an issue of bad politicians or bad candidates. No, the system itself has become bad. So INEC itself has become the guarantee of having bad leadership or bad government in Nigeria. So if that problem is not fixed, then any electoral or political movement is sort of like putting the cart before the horse. We have the EFCC going after a former APC governor. We had a minister, Betta Edu, removed in the midst of all this, and so on and so forth. What do you make of the controversial coastal highway project by the federal government involving Landmark? The current project, which supposedly needs Landmark to be demolished, was a deviation from the original project. The blueprints are now in the public domain. I'm sure you must have seen them. Somebody went out of their way to ensure that someone's private enterprise was destroyed in the name of building infrastructure. Now, the infrastructure that is being built, first of all, there's absolutely no guarantee whatsoever that this thing is ever actually going to get built. Because if you look at the economics of the project, makes it very clear that the thing is going to become an expensive, abandoned project. It's never going to happen. The best that will happen is maybe a section of the project in Calabar and in Lagos might get completed, or maybe a 10 or 20-kilometer section, and that is where it will die for several years. If you look at the cost of the project, we're talking about billions of dollars, not naira. Nigeria simply doesn't have the money and won't for quite some time. So the only justification I can see for the huge wealth destruction that took place is that if you look at the new route of the supposed coastal road through Lagos, it is essentially going to connect Eco Atlantic with the new developments happening in Ibeju-Lekki. So essentially, one man is trying to make it such that his private investments or the investments he and a consortium have put together, because whether he'll publicly admit or not, Eco Atlantic is him and he is Eco Atlantic. Himself and Gilbert Chaguri are indistinguishable as a business entity. They are one and the same. Eco Atlantic is a Tinubu project. It is a Tinubu investment, whether this is politically correct to say or not. This person is trying to make Eco Atlantic more viable because currently, as it exists, I'm sure you are aware, it has basically stalled. As it exists, it is basically a huge white elephant. It is a waste of money. So this is an attempt to use state money and state power, state influence to turn the huge private white elephant to a thriving city where he can carry out his favorite activity, which is selling land for billions. That is what this is all about, unfortunately. Finally, what is it like at this point in time, still trying to make a difference while not being in the country, as seeing all that is happening? Regardless of where you happen to be geographically nowadays, one still has an opportunity to make change because internet access is almost ubiquitous anywhere in Africa. So gone are the days when you had to be on ground before you had a voice or you could get things done. Just by having a Twitter account, it is possible to get things done nowadays. I don't feel as if I'm absent per se. However, I do concede that especially as time goes on and as the bad actors in the system continue to entrench themselves further, the question does sort of come up a couple of times in one's mind. What exactly is the point of all this? But I guess how I rationalize it in my head is that, well, someone has to do it. And that's just the way it is. When you claim to be fighting for a bigger cause than you, I guess one of the conditions that comes with it is you having to accept what you are fighting for might not even materialize in your lifetime. Might be for the sake of your children that you are doing it, but you won't say that because it is not happening in front of you. Then that means you are just going to give up and walk away.